Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Hashim Kumar. Tonight on World Talks, we focus on Greenland and Europe's response to President Donald Trump's renewed pressure on the Arctic island following high-stakes talks in Washington between US, Danish and Greenlandic leaders. Clear red lines were drawn on sovereignty, while cooperation on security and the economy remains on the table. What does this mean for NATO, transatlantic relations and Europe's ability to push back? Our guest is Professor David Dunn, international politics expert from the University of Birmingham. Professor Dunn, welcome back to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time.
Always good to be here.
So let's start off with the meeting between the US, Greenland and Denmark in Washington, which took place yesterday. Your takeaways from that?
Well, I think two things that are worth noting. The first is that J.D. Vance, the Vice President, insisted on attending the meeting. So you can imagine that he added a hard edge to Marco Rubio's more diplomatic efforts to try and finesse this topic of tension between the allies. And the second thing is that the statements coming out of that were very worrying. It was talked about there being a frank exchange of views, which is diplomatic language for they clearly disagreed and couldn't come to negotiated settlement. And the fact that the Danish foreign minister said that there were fundamental issues of difference between the parties. So it's a zero-sum thing. They can't both own the Greenland, and neither side was prepared to back down on this. And given the fact that the status quo is that the sovereignty of Greenland is Danish, it's clearly the Americans who are trying to upset the status quo in this region on this issue.
I mean, how realistic is it, in your opinion, that America will take military action to take over Greenland if a diplomatic solution can't be found?
Well, the interesting thing here is that one can never seem to prejudge Mr. Trump in terms of actually his willingness to challenge every norm, every treaty, every agreement, every expectation. So I hesitate to say never when it comes to him, because I would not have imagined that we would be at this point even a year ago, or even 4 months ago, because there seems to be, in most people's mind, an assumption that actually the established frontiers of international politics are established, are enshrined in the UN Charter, and are non-negotiable apart from mavericks and rogue states and heretics. And here we have the American president willing, it seems, to challenge that by this odd phrase of "I must have Greenland," as if it's an imperial wish. So it's difficult to see what meaningful it would be, the idea of military force taking Greenland, but one can never rule anything out, it seems, with this president.
Right. Now, there is a high-level meeting planned in Copenhagen in the not-too-distant future amongst the same parties. What do you think the ambition for that meeting is likely to be?
I think, as far as Denmark is concerned, is to demonstrate that actually anything meaningful that they want for the use of Greenland, in terms of using it for building its golden dome, or for deploying more troops, or even for mineral extraction. All those are perfectly reasonable requests, and they will be responded to reasonably by Denmark and by Greenland. What isn't reasonable is that they demand for ownership. This imperial desire to expand the size of the United States, so that Trump has this legacy, almost as if he wants Greenland like another trophy wife. That's not reasonable, and therefore what the parties and the diplomacy will be trying to offer alternatives to that, and trying to actually push the issue down the road, so that actually his efforts to do so are limited by Congress, or he comes distracted by other things. Diplomacy is often about deferral rather than solutions necessarily.
Right, you mentioned Congress there, and there's been a bipartisan bill introduced into Congress to prevent this action by Donald Trump. What does that tell you?
It tells you that actually he hasn't got bipartisan support on this issue in America. I mean, it's more of a token gesture by Congress. It has more symbolic power than anything else, because two things: he is the commander in chief, and he has authority through the Constitution to act as the main agent in foreign policy. And even if he is limited by the Constitution, he doesn't seem to pay much attention to that, anyways, as we've seen in a whole variety of things, particularly, of course, trade policy and tariffs. So it's more an attempt to try and nudge him in the right direction. Now, of course, Congress controls the power of the purse. They could limit his actions by shutting down government or defunding the Pentagon, but they're drastic steps that you wouldn't necessarily get support for. But what it does do is an indication of just how much disquiet there is in Washington on this question, because this drives a coach and horses through every principle that America is supposed to stand for in foreign policy and in obeying the rules of the law, both international and domestic.
Now, the disquiet isn't only in Washington, is it, Professor? I mean, it's in Europe as well. How would you assess the European response? It's been supportive of Denmark. Many European countries, France, Germany, UK and others, have said we stand by Denmark's right. So how effective is it? How powerful is their message?
Well, I think the Europeans in the last year have actually bit their tongue, as it were, metaphorically, on trade policy, on a whole variety of different issues, and not pushed back on America and on Trump in his dealings with things international and indeed domestically. This issue, by virtue of it striking at the very core of international law and indeed the whole fabric and integrity and meaning of the transatlantic alliance, NATO, is one whereby they have pushed back, and they've made it very clear in the statements they have given, or certainly the Western Europeans have, the concerns that this raises, and indeed how actually non-negotiable this is, because to do this would be to replicate what Putin has done in Ukraine, in terms of actually the prospect of threatening or using military force to actually annex a neighboring country just because you feel like it, rather than having any justification for doing so. So this is fundamental, and they're pushing back. How effective they will be is another question, of course, because at the same time they have to balance the desire to keep America engaged in the defense of Ukraine and in the defense of Europe more broadly. So there is a lot at stake at this. But this is such a fundamental threat that actually they're showing mettle here, and the deployment of military forces to Greenland by a whole variety of European states has two aspects to it. It is both demonstrating that they are serious about the defence of Greenland by European states as part of the NATO context. But it's also saying, actually, we're deploying forces here, and therefore, if you were to use military force against Greenland, you run the risk of tripping over these forces and all the consequences that follow from that. So there are two aspects of that policy. And again, this is a territory which is unimagined in the history of the transatlantic relations, unimagined in transatlantic relations more broadly, and it's where we find ourselves.
Right. So you mentioned deployment of military forces from various countries, and interestingly, the UK has offered one soldier to go to Greenland, but other countries aren't that much better. I mean, they're all in single digits, the number of people they've sent there. Now, is the message there that, to Trump, look, don't try and invade us because we will respond militarily? Or is the message to Trump, well, you know what, we do have the ability to strengthen our military presence in Greenland and protect it against Russia and China? Which do you think, if either, the message is?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to the UK, there are plans to send other larger units of troops to Greenland, and the UK has also pointed out that actually it has several thousand troops in Norway, in the Arctic region more broadly. But as I said in my last answer to a degree, there are two aspects of this deployment. Ostensibly, it is about demonstrating the capability of the Europeans to offer active defence of Denmark, Greenland rather, but there is that other aspect that actually, if they do deploy forces up there, and the Americans were inclined to use military force, then there is the possibility of the American forces, as I say, tripping over, bumping into, coming into conflict with, clashing with other European powers that are up there. So I think there's two aspects of the policy.
Right. Now, we had a guest on News in Depth who suggested that a potential outcome might be a division of Greenland because it is so enormous, some of it controlled by the United States to protect against external threats from Russia and China. How likely do you think that scenario is?
I think it's very unlikely, actually, because the 1951 agreement between the United States and Denmark allowed the United States to have access to all aspects of Greenland for their defense. And they have had, historically, many thousands of troops there in the past. It's only actually the Trump administration that's pulled back the number of troops there to the number of hundreds. So there's nothing there's nothing that the Americans can't do for the defense of America using Greenland that isn't prohibited and invited by Denmark as part of the 1951 agreement. So this is not about security. Don't believe Trump when he tells you we have to have Greenland for security purposes. There's nothing that he's prohibited to do in the defense of Denmark that he couldn't do without owning it. This is about adding it to the territorial size of the United States, and of course, it follows from there that if he gets Greenland, then perhaps he will come knocking on Canada's door next, or perhaps Shetland, or perhaps Iceland. The demands for the expansion of the United States, mentioned in his inaugural address a year ago, suggests that actually it's about size. He views the world as a real estate developer. This is one more lot that he wants to put a hotel onto, as it were. And that is unacceptable when people are living there and don't want to be part of the American empire. And that's where we are.
OK. Professor David Dunn, thank you so much, as always, for coming along and clarifying many of those key issues for our audience. Do come and see us again soon. Have a good evening.
And you.
Thank you. Bye. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, though. World news coming right up. Bye for now.